Hello, everybody. My name is Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft, and we are here on episode 11 of the State of Craft. I can't believe it's been 11 episodes. That's pretty cool. For those of you who are new here, the State of Craft is a series where we have all kinds of really highly respected and awesome people from across the cannabis industry as guests to share their perspectives on what's going well, what's not going well, and what needs to change in the legal craft cannabis industry. Today, we have some really awesome people who I will introduce in a few minutes here who have expertise in the insurance industry, specifically in cannabis. CertiCraft, our business, we're focused on helping craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market. Our flagship product is a compliance platform that makes it super easy for licensed producers to stay on top of all of their regulatory requirements. And if you're curious about that, you can hit us up and we will gladly show you a demo of our system. For those of you who are trickling in, I just want to point out a few things. We have a chat where you can say hi and you can make any comments you want throughout this conversation. We encourage you guys to be active there. If you have any questions for Linda and Scott, who I will introduce momentarily here, we have a different questions tab that's separate from the chat. So please go there to ask any questions. If you like any questions, you can upvote them. And at the end, we will go through questions in order of popularity. We'll have 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to make everybody look equal size here. And yeah, I'm super thankful to have you both here, Scott and Linda. And I think it would be nice if you guys actually introduced each other today. I'd love to see how you would.
Who wants to go first? I'll go first.
Well, yeah. Why don't you introduce Linda first, since you got your.
Okay. This is Linda Dohmeier, my wife as well, but she is an insurance agent, works at Maxim Insurance, and she specializes in cannabis insurance only for licensed producers, retail stores. Basically, her world revolves around insuring and risk managing cannabis businesses in Canada only. She doesn't do other things except for cannabis, so she specializes in that. So, and I just wanted to say and make an announcement to everybody that I am no longer a licensed insurance broker. I work at a licensed producer now as a business development specialist, as it says in my title. And I just have to let everybody know that I'm not a licensed broker, but I can tell stories about my career. So I'll tell lots of stories about it. And kind of
looking forward to hearing those stories today.
Yeah. Thank you. So that's Linda. She's very good. She was my executive assistant for about 10 years when I ran the insurance program. So most of the clients might know her, and she's very knowledgeable about doing the right thing for cannabis clients. And not a solicitor. Most of the business comes to her from word of mouth or their website. So.
And we've heard lots of great things about you, Linda, and what you do with your insurance work from a lot of people in the craft industry over the past year or two, which is a big part of why we wanted to both have you meet Legal Larry. We have a Legal Larry video out with Linda, and also to be here now today with Scott. Linda, do you want to introduce your husband?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Sami. So Scott's been in insurance for a very, very, very long time, like over 20 years. And when he started the medical marijuana insurance program back in the day, it was so busy, he needed an executive assistant, and I got into insurance. So I helped him for many, many, many years. And, really, when it comes right down to it, if there's insurance questions or knowledge, he knows, because he worked both sides of it, pre-cannabis, cannabis gray, and then cannabis legalization. So, he really is an expert, and I'm very lucky to have that as a resource.
Awesome. Thank you both for the wonderful introductions, and welcome. I'm excited that you guys are here and excited to learn what you guys have to share. So yeah, I mean, you guys have attended many of these in the past, so you kind of know the drill, but essentially for the audience, those of you guys who might not have been here before, these conversations, it's really just 3 questions that I ask, and then the discussions that emerge from those questions. And those questions are what do you think is going well in the legal craft cannabis industry? What is not going well in the legal craft cannabis industry? And what do you think should change and how in order to address those problems? And every time our guests kind of bring their respective expertise to the table. So I expect that today we'll have a lot of learnings and eye-opening conversations about the world of insurance, which I know close to nothing about. I just know that it's a huge challenge for a lot of our clients at CertiCraft. And so with that being said, I'd like to turn the floor over to either of you guys. What do you guys feel is going really well in the world of legal craft cannabis?
Finding a way to market with your craft cannabis is very hard to do, and I'm speaking from an LP perspective, but I know the challenges from an insurance perspective as well. But I could talk about the LP stuff, and the market's evolving right now. I just read that Aurora is turning into a branding house, and they're not going to be growing.
What does that mean to be a branding house? Is in they're going to buy a whole bunch of other brands or something?
Well, it's kind of what you don't need to be a licensed producer to be a branding house, right? You just need to work with the right people. There's lots of guys that are doing branding that are not licensed, right? And branding is probably one of the most important things, moving forward as well for anybody who's in the space. The big guys, the glut of cannabis, there's been quite a few articles coming out about why is it so hard to do business in this space. They've only sold 16% of all the weed produced since 2018. They've destroyed more than they've grown, and so it gives you the perspective that this industry is in trouble. But the reality of it is, it's just finding its feet. There's a transition period that needs to sort itself out, and the rush to square footage and the trusting of people who invested. I mean, I think the losses are adding up to over $10 billion in this space right now, and it can really give the wrong message to anybody who isn't really involved. But the reality of it is it's now turning back to the craft producers. LPs now are looking at working, or the bigger LPs are looking at trying to get with the small quality producers, and the word craft by definition it's skilled hand work, and that's kind of how we like to move forward in this space. We're not looking at trying to own the market with square footage and all that sort of stuff. That's not going to work, and it's very obvious. And as a result of all this burning of capital and settling in the markets and the retail stores, it's now the guns are turning and looking at the guys that can grow good product, right? And I think that the quality story needs to be first and foremost, and small batch, high quality, and right now that's the gold. That's what's been selling. And pricing wise, there's that $75 ounce that's out there. That's limited. It's not going to stay out there for that long, but it's just a segment of the market. I don't know anybody in the craft space that could produce a $75 ounce, unless there's somebody out there that can tell me that. But value brands are important, but right now the craft producer is going to be shining. In the next 12 months, it's going to be craft. All the smaller guys, we need to collaborate. We need to get 10 micros together to just slam them and stuff like that. So anyways,
how do you see that path to market itself? Because I know a lot of our clients and a lot of other craft growers that we've talked to, kind of their big challenge is they have really great cannabis, and unless they have a good relationship with a processor, or they themselves are a processor, which is definitely like the minority of craft growers,
right?
What do you see? How do you see that shift to actually make it viable to get to market at a price per gram where they can thrive and actually do well?
I could tell you what we've done, right? And then people can sort of understand. we have a cultivation license and a medical sales license, and we haven't deployed the medical sales license yet.
And do you have a
We have
processing
been
as well, so you
producing
can package
lots of-
your own? So you can package your own. Okay.
No. The only thing we can do as a processor is mill.
Okay.
Is mill product. That's the only type of processing for pre-rolls or whatever. But we haven't, we're very strain specific. We won't do that. Excuse me. Well, shit, I lost my train of thought there.
You're talking about your medical sales license and your cultivation license.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
How you approach going to market.
Yeah. And right. So the only access to market that we would have is if we were to find a relationship with a processor and do a product transfer to them. They process the products, and we're allowed to possess cannabis products and then, ship them out as we have our medical sales platform get going.
Yeah.
But that, is not a volume thing. The medical sales is nice to have, but it's really the retail that you want. So with that in mind, the way that we found our way to market is you need to find a processor who is willing to work with you in the sense that, we need to come up with a proper agreement for them to take our product and run it through their thing. It's, very, very, almost a lot of the LPs are doing that right now. Right. And it's all about working with somebody who has access to market. And then price wise,
can I just interject those contracts that you're working with? That's where your insurance requirements are going to come in.
When
you say contract, are you talking about the contract to the processor here as a cultivator?
Correct. Yeah. I'm in the process right now of reviewing contracts for genetics, contracts for just products, JVs, and every single one of them has a whole section on insurance, risk transfer, and also whether or not you are going to be held harmless by the people down the road. And
so Linda, can you maybe tell us a little bit about like what those terms that Scott just mentioned are, and like what kind of insurance, when it comes to just making a sale of cannabis, a cultivator really needs to be aware of that they might not necessarily be aware of because they don't have a decade plus of experience in this world like you guys do?
Sure. So here in BC, of course, the processors and nurseries, can sell to the BCLDB. So they have those requirements. But when they're joining into a contract with a cultivator, in that cultivator, there might be some wordings where the processor is saying, if I'm at risk, you're at risk. And then there might be a part where it's going to say, the cultivator wants to be held harmless, right? So it's all going to fall under the producer. So it's really, you have to negotiate those contracts as well. So they're going to come to you standard, and you're going to see some of them. And I've seen some where literally the processor has said, well, I have to have $10 million with the BCLDB for product liability and recall. So do you. And for a micro, that's just,
completely unrealistic.
It's very unrealistic, right? So, you want to work with them on these hold harmless and risk transfer, right? That's not to say that you still shouldn't have product liability, but the recall, you might be able to wiggle out of the recall with the contract. So, definitely.
Especially since the whole point of you can't even have a relationship with a distributor like the BCLDB without a processing license. So why the heck would a processor expect you to have that same insurance when you can't even legally do that? That's why they're coming to the processor. So are there processors
can still buy that
really
insurance though, right? Like your product can be involved in a recall.
Yeah.
And what we've done, I just, maybe I could enlighten, and this would be great advice for anybody who is a micro out there, is you have get your $2 million worth of product liability. That basically will what you need. Now we're an LP. We're not.
So even as a micro, you think that every micro, that's, even if they're selling to a processor that has their own recall insurance and they're not making you get your own, you still think it's a good idea to get that?
Yeah. Well, let me explain it in terms here. We're a licensed producer. We're not a micro. although we're just about 1,000 square feet above the same square footage that micros do. So, and we're a high, we're not publicly traded. We're a small family business. We're craft. We're like a micro, even though we're an
1,000 square feet more is nothing compared to like the giant OPs.
No, it's just we don't have a ceiling. And so, for example, I'm trying to work with 7 micros.
Yeah.
And I want to deploy genetics, or what they have is going to be okay if that's the case. But when I'm buying their product, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to resell it, and I'm adding 15 cents a gram. And the reason why, that's reasonable, by the way, that's very reasonable. The reason why is because they only have product liability, but you're running under my, I give you a hold harmless, meaning we'll look after product recall. We'll look after all that stuff. We hold them harmless so that if the shit hits the fan, we're the ones that are dealing with it, unless they were negligent in preparing the product for product liability, which you should have anyways. Like, you know, if the COAs missed something or whatever, right? It's almost impossible to put out bad product in theory. However, the freaking recalls are happening all the time. And when I was a licensed broker dealing with recall insurance, they gave it away for nothing at the beginning, but then they had these massive claims, and now it's so tight, right? But that's why, because there's been multiple recalls.
So can you guys help me understand what is product liability insurance and how is that different from recall insurance?
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I'll tell you what I know, because product liability will basically look after, like, you know, once the product is out and packaged and sold, right? It's out there, and the only time product liability will work for you is if they were negligent in the preparing of the product. And I'll give you an example, like if I produce vodka, right? And you can't sue me because vodka ruined your life. But if I messed up in my production and listeria ended up in vodka, and you drank it, and your wife drank some and she was pregnant and she lost her baby, because that's what listeria does, then they would name us in a lawsuit, and we would have a duty to defend. And the duty to defend is I mean, that's lawyer money, right? And that's what you want. You want somebody to look after you. And the defense costs are outside of the liability limit. So if you have $2 million worth of liability, they could, you know, you got to make sure your policy doesn't, you know, if they say defense costs are inclusive of the limit, you could spend $1 million on lawyers and you only have $1 million to settle. So you need to get one that has the defense costs on the outside so that it's unlimited there, and then you always have your $2 million to settle. That's just a nuance that Linda, when people ask her, she'll make sure your policy is correct the way you want it. But those are the things that can come back and mess you up, right, as a business person, and
so there's
take your assets.
First party claims and third party claims, right? And the funny thing is,
what do those mean? I don't know what that means.
Okay,
what is first party claim and a third party claim?
So your first party claim is anything arising out of an accident, injury, or loss caused by a manufacturing defect, improper labeling, failure to warn customers about the potential hazards, inaccurate THC measurements, you know, mold presence, that kind of thing, carcinogens with vapes, right? Third party is property damage. So loss of wages. So something stemming from the result of. Yeah,
right. Proving your damages.
So like, would an example of that third party be the listeria and baby loss example that Scott gave?
Yeah.
Okay. The third party, there's you, the insurance company, and then the third party that comes after you. That's how that's one set up.
Okay.
So when she says third party, that's.
Okay, so I cut you off there, Linda, because I just wanted to understand the terms that you were using there.
So what I was just talking about, or was going to get into, is just recently the underwriters have now, for cultivators, right? So they're not selling to the BCLDB, but the underwriters are now wanting to know if their products are going to be used in vapes, right? Because this it's that supply chain all the way, right? Because there's so many exclusions. So on your policies, they want to basically exclude that coverage.
So how does that work? Because like anybody can buy dried flower and put it in a vape, and then they're vaping dried flower, or do they mean specifically the vape pens that have like the particular extract meant for that? Is that what they mean when they say vapes?
Well,
Okay,
I'm currently answering that question, and what they wanted to know from me as an LP was if there's the potential of any of my flower products ending up in vape pens. Okay. And if there is, the insurance goes to $150,000 compared to $80,000.
And what is it about vape? Like I know there's been a lot of talk about vape pens, and there's been a lot of like regulations coming down into the vaping industry, but I've known nothing about that.
Long chain liability.
What does that mean?
Well, if you think about in the past, things like the asbestos, so a liability issue that they're unaware of, that over time becomes a problem, and all of a sudden everybody wakes up and there's either class actions or something, and then they go after the insurance companies from who are insuring the products way back in the day. So if, for example, over 5 to 10, 15 years of use of vape pens, certain things start to come out in people, certain illnesses or and again, I defer to the asbestos story. That was, like one of the first long tail liabilities. And if anybody Googles the liability story of asbestos, you'll have a very clear understanding of what I'm talking about, what they're scared of. Because their financial models don't put money aside for future losses like that. So they want to deal with either excluding it before going on risk, or and that's why they ask, because
what is it about vape pens that makes it so that they double the insurance?
Well, there's been how many articles?
Okay, so you're saying basically we don't know what might happen, but it seems like there's a lot of
unknown potential.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for connecting the dots for me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's maybe I explained a little different, but it's that long tail to bring back to what happened 10 years ago when sure we're insuring vapes, no problem, all this, and all of a sudden we got to pay out $1 billion for we were wrong. Because there is a lot of science out there, like that canopy study that was done. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Nope.
But there was a study that was done by Canopy, and it turned out that what they thought was bad wasn't bad, and what is good is bad. And you could Google the vape study by Canopy to get it, because somebody, I think, forced them through Information Act or something it wasn't supposed to be publicly released, but it is now. Yeah. And as a result, and it's the latest study, and as a result, that's why Tokyo Smoke and all these places are pulling the vapes, right? Because number one, it's going to double their insurance. Well, not quite double, but it's going to add a ton more. But at the same time, they got to figure out the formulations, right? And make sure that they don't move forward with something that possibly can hurt people. Yeah. And again, it's a very unknown science at the moment, right? And this, there's lots of chatter about it, but it's not that good.
And there's no market for it either. There's only one market in Canada that will not exclude vapes, and it's extremely expensive. And the problem is that you have these processors, whether they be micro or standard, and they're shopping on price, right? And their brokers aren't going into the wordings and all of that stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, well, here's a $50,000 policy. And then, you come along and go through the wordings and go, oh, yes, but 80% of your business model is excluded on this policy. So here, let's get you the quote for the proper one, but it comes in at 150,000. And they're like, nope, can't do it. Right. And so they take a policy which is only going to cover 20% of their business operations for $50,000. Yeah. Right. And your broker needs to go through your wordings with you, those hundreds of pages that you get before, when you're in the quote section, your broker's asking the underwriter for those wordings, going through them so that they can explain to you what is covered, why it's not covered, and get more of an idea. But like I said, this latest one is now all of a sudden it's for cultivators. They're wanting to know where your product is going to be used.
Is there anything else you would add about product liability insurance generally for cultivators and why you think it's really important for them, Linda?
Well, it's no different than anything else that you manufacture, right? If you manufacture something, you're in that supply chain, right? And there is a potential, even with the contract, even with the hold harmless and things like that, where you'll still be named in that lawsuit. And the product liability, what that will do is it will give you the money to be able to defend. But then you got to make sure the defense cost isn't excluded either. So there's, that can happen too. But it could be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 just to defend the fact that you aren't negligent.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing to that as well too. In a contract that we have where we would hold harmless the micro and go under our recall and go under their product liability plus our product liability, because it could have been the labeling that was wrong, not the product. So but when we do it like that, it's like spreading the risk a bit as well, right? But regardless, when the lawsuit hits, we're going to be named and the supplier is going to be named.
Yeah.
And then through a discovery or something where there will be legal expense, they'll review the contracts, find out that we're holding them harmless. They'll be able to prove, and we'll be able to step forward and say, look, they're out. It's us, not them. Right. Yeah. But that still happens. You still get named. You still have to go through the process. And that's not comfortable. And so just backing up as a licensed producer, it would be so irresponsible to my investors or anybody involved if I didn't put product liability. Like I couldn't imagine operating without product liability. It would be so wrong. And as a director or an officer of a company, you could be held personally liable potentially for something like that. Yeah. If you choose to not do something that you're supposed to do. Right. So it's a huge deal.
So the analogy that I'm going to make, and the way this is kind of making sense to me, I used to run an events promotion company in Vancouver. We did all kinds of interesting music and art related events. And when we got a grant from the BC... There's the puppies. Linda has 6 dogs at her house. When we got a grant from the BC Arts Council, it was a different. I forget what body exactly. They part of the stipulation was we had to get general liability insurance so that if anything ever happened at an event and that attendee chose to sue us, we had liability to cover just anything that might have happened at an event that was out of the ordinary. It sounds to me that product liability is kind of the equivalent of that for the events promotion world. Is that analogy at all apt in your opinion?
I would say so. That's more of an insurance requirement in a contract, right? Where often product liability is not an insurance requirement. I'll tell a story. The only time I ever quoted crop coverage was because it was in a contract for an investment. I put a quote out there, and then when they saw what it cost, they spent a third of the money in risk management protocols to protect the crop, right? But it's always there's insurance you should have that is just proper business, like product recall, and then there's the insurance requirements. But it is the same thing, Sammy. If that, like, let's say it was a bit of a fly by night organization and they didn't have that requirement in the contract, and you could just show up, set up, and have the event. What if something happened?
Yeah, what if a speaker fell and crushed somebody?
Everybody gets you better, and my point is, regardless whether they need it or not, as a responsible business person, you should understand that you need to have liability for that, right? And make sure that you're protected. And you got to work with brokers that are not salespeople. Right? You got to work with a professional, somebody
that actually care.
Yeah.
Like Linda, we've heard a lot about that from Linda from clients who've worked with her in the past.
There you go.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about product liability here. What are other types of insurance, if there are any at all, that a cultivator specifically, not processor, no other kind of license, just a cultivator or a nursery, let's say, and with a nursery, we're assuming that they're only selling bulk sales to other producers, they're not selling to the provincial distribution boards. Are there any other types of insurance that a cultivator you think really should be thinking about and taking seriously?
I'll answer that real quick because I'm about to ship 30 kilograms down to get e-beamed. So when it's off my premises and in transit, I don't know what that's worth off the top of my head, but it's probably worth a lot of money. If there's a car accident or it just burns up or it's robbed, whatever, right? I mean, we're doing the right protocol and chain of custody to get it down to the e-beamers, but am I covered? Do I understand what's going to happen? Who's actually got insurable interest in that product? Is it me? Is it them? It's going to be in their care, custody, and control. So if they're negligent, their insurance covers it, but I have to sue them to get it. So why would I do that? I just would cover it myself, right? Transit insurance. So that's, not a requirement again, unless it is in a contract. Like if you're shipping lots of product to another LP from across Canada, you'll probably find it in a contract, but this is a smaller version of it. And we're deciding to not buy insurance. We're deciding to risk manage and make sure that we do it correctly. So that's what we're doing, right? But that's an example where if I had 60 kilograms, I probably would buy insurance, or at least alter my policy so that, should something happen, we're protected financially from that, because that would be a hit.
Yeah, that'd be pretty major.
Well, Linda, transit insurance, right? That
so there's all kinds of coverages, right? And when I'm doing a policy, I like to get a quote for absolutely everything, so that you can get a bird's eye view of the costs, what it's going to cover, what it's for, and then you get to decide what you want to back out, right? Instead of coming in at the third hour going, oh my goodness, we need transit, or we need, crop, or we need this. At least you have an idea of where it is, so that it can, you can start to fit it into your budgets or into your contract negotiations, that kind of thing, right?
I'll give you an example. We were quoted coverage called mechanical and electrical breakdown, which is, I think they described it as sudden and accidental breakdown of equipment, production equipment, which again could be an issue for an LP, right? And initially, I'm like, we're trying to keep our costs down, But when the quote came, there was a price beside everything, and it was only another $600 a year. Yeah. Right. I thought it was going to be $2,000 or something, or whatever. Right. So the way that she shows it is it's broken right down. Like you got the Lincoln or the Cadillac version of coverages. If you want a Honda, you can start to strip the stuff out. Right. And also, for example, you don't need transit now, but here's what it costs. So when 6 months from now, when you're going to use it, this is what it's going to cost, right? Yeah. So things like that, and that's what I liked, the comprehensive quote with all the prices beside it, so I could see what I'm paying for liability. I could see what I'm paying for transit, right? And so instead of like it's just a big number, right? So I really like that.
So Linda, I've got a question for you, though you just muted yourself, so maybe it's noisy in your place. So I'll take my time asking the question so they can quiet down. So right now, let's say a micro cultivator were to come to you and they were to say, hey, I saw that CertiCraft podcast with you and your husband, and I want to get a quote of the Cadillac of insurance with every single thing in there that is a coverage that you think is relevant for my needs. Can you kind of give us like just a quick shotgun kind of approach, just a name of insurance and like a sentence or two about what it is, just so that myself and our audience can kind of get an understanding, a bird's eye view of just what kind of things might be in there that we don't even realize there's insurance for that could be useful for a grower?
Wow. Okay. So that's going to, that's really going to depend, right? Are you on your personal property? Are you on a commercial property? There's so many limitations on your personal property right now. And there is zero solution. It's just not there. And So, but if, let's say you're in commercial, so you want your property covered. So your building, your equipment, you want to have your commercial general liability, your GL, your product liability, stock in transit. There might be some crop coverage, your product coverage, seeds, plants, that kind of stuff. Then there's also D&O. There's also E&O.
What's D&O and what's E&O?
There's an officers.
Okay.
There's E&O, so errors and omissions. What am I forgetting? Stock in transit.
There's
So
so
basically,
many
there's
more.
a lot of different things, and like I had no idea. I can speak for myself. I don't know if our audience feels the same way, but I can tell you that I had no idea that there was like so many different things. Like to me,
there is cyber liability is one that I'm looking into right now.
Yeah.
And
so is that like if you get hacked or something like that, or?
Well, if you can have a website, but if you hold personal medical information and financial information, right? You're held in a higher state of duty and care in the eyes of the law. So we're getting ready to do that because of our medical. So that's something that I've identified as an area where I want to transfer the risk. There's so much going on right now in the cyber world with these ransoms and stuff like that. And, it will affect a company again, right? And then your IT guy says to you, just pay them. It's like, what? Right? Like, it's crazy.
I don't have $1.5 million to pay them. What are you talking about?
Well, they always know what it will cost you, and they back it down a little bit. Right. Yeah. And it's their standard method. So some of them are for 50 grand, some of them are for 500 grand, some of them are for millions, right? Based on what business they're hitting. Cyber liability to me is a big deal, especially in this world of, so much is done online in cannabis. Right. So,
and I guess especially if you're like a bigger facility where you have lots of different employees that could accidentally fall for a phishing email or a scam,
right. and that's the other thing is
one person within your network to do it.
I highly recommend that anybody in your organization that has an email, that they attend a course on phishing. They're online, they're available anywhere. As a CEO or business development guy out there, you need to do that. You need to make sure they understand what phishing is, because it can destroy your business. And right? That's risk management, not insurance, right? And the way you approach any type of risk in a business is you risk manage everything. Like, give you an example. I'm a hot dog vendor, and every 20 minutes, 10 napkins blow away. Am I going to buy insurance for that? No. What can I do to risk manage it? Well, I'll put a rock on the napkins. Right now, I don't have to worry about it, and I keep on going. And it's on a scale of frequency and severity, meaning how frequent will a total loss fire happen? Almost never. How severe is it? It's on the top of the scale. That's about as bad as you can get. So through understanding your business, you can describe what are your exposures and what is the frequency and severity of potentially something like that. And then you get to a point where they're big and severe. And the last step of a good risk management program is transferring those risks into an insurance policy. Mm-hmm. That's the process, right? You take all the emotion out of it. It's just a matter of what is it working? What can I cover myself? What can I actually not recover from financially that I need to put it in an insurance policy?
Cool. I appreciate that perspective. That's super helpful. I will file that for our own business.
Every business.
Yeah. Cool. So
we can help you.
we're getting close to the end of time here before we got to switch to the Q&A, and I have really not felt that time go by. It's been a whirlwind for me, and we actually haven't really done the thing that we normally do, where we give you a chance to kind of tell us what you feel is going well, not well, and what needs to change. So I'm curious, from the perspective of insurance, what do you guys think is going really well as it relates to craft cannabis, and what do you think is going not well? Because I know I've seen a lot of growers, especially people who live on the property and have their own farm and have had farm insurance forever and ever, and then they like start growing cannabis, and then all of a sudden their insurance company's like, oh, we're not covering you anymore. Like, I don't know anything about that world. So maybe Linda, you're nodding your head there. Could you like give us your perspective on what's going well in insurance and what's not going well and what needs to change? And if it needs to change, what a realistic path is for that change?
Yeah, the micros and some LPs are on their personal property as well. And the second you have cannabis on a property, everything changes, right? There's only 3 companies in Canada that write cannabis. 2 will write residential. 1 won't. You can kind of play with them and have some policy here and some policy there. But the ratings are extremely high. Winnie.
He is talking on air now, Winnie. You calm down.
Wait.
So the ratings are really high, and it's written on a commercial policy now.
Sorry. I want to just understand a term you said there. When you said the ratings are really high, what does that mean?
So how much you pay per $100, right? So
per $100 of insurance that's covered,
right? Yeah. Okay. Right. So if your house is $1 million, a normal house policy is anywhere from 15 to 20 cents per 100, right? Okay. Insurance, we're looking at 85 cents, and it's not on a personal lines policy anymore. So you have no personal liability. You have to put everything back in, right? Like on a personal line, your homeowners, right? Everyone has a homeowner's policy where they understand it's got, flood and sewer and earthquake, and, it protects you from this. None of it. You have to put your contacts back in. You have to put your sewer back in. You have to put all of that back in.
And each time you do that, I'm guessing the price goes up.
Up. And none of this covers your personal liability.
And what is personal liability?
So if you have someone that comes on your property to visit you personally, whether it be a guest, right, or a visitor, and they get hurt, that falls under your personal liability.
But if they were there visiting you as, hey, I'm a potential buyer of your cannabis, I'm coming to visit that, then that would be covered because it's professional.
That's under your GL. That's correct.
Yeah, they call it the reason for the visitor being there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna grab her.
Yeah, you can bring her in. Let's see her. I'd love to meet this cute doggy of yours.
I'm not at home now, by the way. I'm up in Pemberton working, and she's in Maple Bay. Otherwise, if the dogs hear my voice, they stay quiet. Hi, Winnie.
Hi, Winnie. Oh, you're such a sweetie.
So now all the rest are down at my feet, right? They're all dash hounds.
Okay, so what is it? It sounds to me, based off your answer, that a small micro who is living on their own property where they're also growing cannabis, running this business, the only option they really have is just pay a whole bunch of money if you want insurance. Is that about right? Or are there like scenarios where they can't even get the coverage that they need?
Oh, there's that too. So for example, a lot of micros are doing it on their existing farms. They have farm operations. There's no coverage for any other operations except your cannabis. So if you're selling, you have a farm stand or you're selling meat or eggs, and you normally have it covered under your farm policy, no more coverage.
Weird. And is that true for somebody who's on ALR land as well, or is it?
Yeah. They describe it as they don't have the risk appetite. It's not in. A lot of them have believe treaty agreements with the people that supply them the insurance, the actual capacities, and they have rules, and they can't put the policy on if there's this happening there. Right, it's just the rule that they have, as a result, one of my goals when I was in insurance was, we used to be able to do this. It was something that we could do. There were markets we got to do it back.
And so when you say do this, you mean have like farm and personal and cannabis all on the same? Okay.
Yeah, but not an LP.
And
it was MMA.
Oh, so if it was a medical grower, you mean then it was possible?
Yeah,
is that
but you can't do that now. As soon as it got legalized, it got harder for insurance.
Why? What is it about that transition that made it more difficult to just have comprehensive insurance?
I guess it went further up the executive chain in the insurance world, and more. The stigma and risk analysis of cannabis that had been busted needed to be busted again. They started limiting it. It finally went up the chain to the higher ups, and because everybody was going to be doing insurance, right? There's how many LPs, over 700 LPs, and how many retail stores. Like, it's a going concern for insurance companies now, right? And but back in the day, it really wasn't. And as a result of the new players that have come in who haven't been involved with the whole thing, they again, we're almost like we're back in 2017 or 18 right now. It's weird, but there's squeaks out there that programs are coming, right? So it's just a matter of time before Linda cracks that nut. So I'm
perfect segue there. So Linda, do you see that changing? Like, because you're somebody who's been actively working as an insurance broker for 10 years now. Is that correct, or am I incorrect in that?
About there with I took a break in there and have come back, but
So based off what Scott's saying, I'm understanding that when you started, this was possible, and then over time, it stopped being possible.
Believe it or not, it was possible up until last November.
Really?
So we had a regular lines market that would write the house component. Now, granted, it was more expensive. It was still, the ratings were still very high, but it was a personal lines policy. And then you had to place the cannabis with your cannabis market, which was great, right? And but then that regular lines market jumped off, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And so this is the issue. We can get retail and we can get the commercial side of it, but we're trying to put something together for the homeowners, and that is
and does that change? Because when you get a license from Health Canada, you have to have it at a different address, even if it's on the same property. People have creative ways of being essentially on the same property, but with a different address. In the insurance world, does having a different address make it no longer the same property? Or does that not matter?
That's illegal.
Say it again.
A legal address. If there's two legal addresses, absolutely.
But then, so why is this a problem for anybody? Because
the wording state the property line.
Okay, it's about the property line.
Right. If anything is happening on that property, whether it's a mile away or not, it's excluded. So and they go by the property lines. Technically, they're two separate properties legally. We're doing that here.
Okay. So wait, I'm feeling a little confused. Maybe you guys can try to explain that again in a different way, because I know that every single micro, they have to get a different address for their micro compared to their actual home. So how does that play with property lines and whatnot? I'm guessing that it doesn't make an impact, because then people wouldn't have this issue having a separate address made.
What do they just do? Their home address B?
I'm not sure, but that's part of that's part of the stipulations of the Health Canada regulations, that you cannot have a micro on the same property as a residential address. It has to be a unique address.
Well, there's so many that have done it.
For people in the chat, like Earl, I see you're in the chat. Am I correct in that? I feel like you would know that off the top of your head, or Ian, or anybody else who's here in attendance. Because somebody chime in to confirm or deny what I'm saying here? I'm pretty sure that's like a thing that you have to have a separate address.
Would
that have any impact, Linda, on what you're considering?
If you have more than one, you have to have a separate address. You can have more than one, but not on the address. Maybe that's what it is. But I'm sure if anybody can make that comment, that would be great to know, 100%. But
but do they have separate addresses though for each of the
not
to his knowledge, yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder what,
it's something I recommend. Right. Okay. So different municipalities have different rules surrounding that. So with some of the insurance policies, we can write two separate policies, but it depends on what the municipality actually says. So I tend to actually get on the phone and call municipalities and ALR and things like that and find out what those rules are, because if we can do two separate addresses on the same property, And anyway,
that then lets you get by some of these challenges you were talking about earlier.
Yes, it can in some instances, but not all.
Okay. And just for the video here, because the chat won't show up in the video later, Earl did confirm, this is Earl Oliver, he did confirm that he knows several micro-licensed producers with backyard cultivation properties, and they don't have separate addresses to his knowledge.
That's what I've seen as well, Sami.
I wonder if it's a local kootenai thing here, because like all the producers and micros I know around here have all like gotten
it's a great
separate
strategy. I think that if you are planning a micro, that you need to do that. But if you're already built and you can't change it unless you can on your property, because that immediately separates the two properties and it fits the insurance wordings for the property line issues, right? They're not insuring anything over here and vice versa. Right, but they dovetail up for you, and there's no gap, right? You don't fall through the gap. But that's what.
Okay, so sorry for that tangent there as I got into that double address thing. I want to bring it back, Linda, to where you were talking about. So let's assume we have a micro where they don't have separate addresses. It's all on the same property. You know, as of November of last year, you're saying now having comprehensive insurance isn't possible anymore. Do you see that shifting? If so, when, how, what is it that needs to change in order to allow people to actually have a comprehensive insurance if they wanted to, without having all these gaps that exist today?
Well, I wish I knew what could make it change. It's got to come from people pushing their local government, first of all, and it's also got to come from us brokers who are pushing our markets.
And when you say your markets, what does that mean? What are you talking about? Underwriters here? Are you talking?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I have certain underwriters, that are just in cannabis, but every time I get an opportunity to speak to a business development, there's I quote something and they come in and I'm like, they decline it. And I'm like, well, what do you do? And I go back and forth. And then I ask to speak to the business development manager and I start talking to them about what I do and what I need. And, sometimes it goes up the chain and sometimes, I get to talk to VPs and things like that. And you just start putting it in their heads, right? And I do this an awful lot. I'm always just saying, this is what we need. This is what we need. This is why we need it. I've got 10 years of statistics from Scott, who was part of the Allard case, where his statistics were used in that Allard case, and to prove that these are not the risks that the insurance companies think. And so it's just talking to them all the time, refreshing. 6 months later, I'm like picking up the phone or sending another email going, hey, just seeing how you're making out. Is there any wiggle room? Is there something more that you need from me? Just constantly being on regular lines markets. And hopefully, and there are a few that are starting to tiptoe in. There are a few that are working with me to tiptoe in with certain things they picked and choose, that kind of stuff. And so that's it, building relationships. Your brokers have to build the relationship. When I get a decline, it's never a decline for me. It's an opportunity.
So it sounds to me from your answer that really the crux of the problem in the insurance world is that as cannabis went legal, and now you had all these major brands that were having splashes, and there's the green rush with the stock market, and people on Reddit, 50,000 people on a subreddit that are all like excited about pot stocks, and all these different things are taking place. And so now it's like a much bigger profile in this way. And all of these insurance underwriters, the higher ups, like you were saying earlier, Scott, they just don't understand the industry. They're stigma based. And so they have all these preconceptions about.
It's still stigma. It's still stigma.
And the challenge is to get them to understand that it's just a freaking farm like anything else. There's nothing different about it. It's just a different crop. And until that connection is made for those underwriters, there will continue to be challenges. And it's just an education thing, really.
Well, it's not so much the underwriters, because they have to do what their markets and their actuaries are telling them. So
what does the word markets mean? You've used that a few times, and I think I just don't understand how you're using it in this context. Could you explain what that means?
So a market is the actual insurance company. So let's just say Next Wave, right? My underwriter is the person that I deal with. The policy comes from Next Wave, but their policies are written by another market called Winwood, right? Some markets are Lloyd's.
Insurance company. Is the
right?
easy way.
It's an insurance company, right?
Yeah.
So, but the underwriter doesn't have a choice.
It's broker talk. It's our vernacular. So
Yeah.
when the broker says markets, they actually mean a place that will quote.
Okay.
Right. And there's, intact or like you said, special risk or whatever. Right. So all the markets that Linda would send out all the submissions to start to get them back. And then that's when they decline. That's her opportunity. She was saying, where she phones them and says, hi, I do insurance of cannabis. Are you interested? And they all are. Right. It's amazing. They all want to. Oh, wow,
but they're afraid. They
right?
want to, but they're afraid about these things that they're just ignorant about and don't understand.
Well, can I just digress to the first policy I wrote?
Sure.
Which was in 2008, and I had gone to 30 markets, right? And the one guy that came back to me and said, I might just look into this, and the reason why is because he had an uncle who had glaucoma.
Yeah.
And nothing worked except weed.
Yeah.
Right. And he was an MMAR patient, or he grew his own.
Yeah.
And so that allowed this underwriter to just
have a bit of a different perspective
have a
about
look,
it. Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing when I went to my boss and said, hey, you know what? I want to sell cannabis insurance. Are you concerned if the stigma taints the agency or something like that? And he said, no, I know people that are being helped by cannabis, so I think we should try. And all along in my entire career, every time I gained something, it's because somebody had a personal situation with cannabis, right? And some people know this about me, but I'm a patient. I have a lovely scar here for a C6, C7 spinal cord fusion from a car accident. Spent 90 days in a halo. It was ruining my relationship and me as a dad and all that stuff. And you remember those days. And
good times.
And I was on maximum gabapentin and T3s just to freaking sleep sometimes, right? And it was effing me up. And I was at the time selling cannabis insurance. Like it was perfect. And my very first client came to my house with me sitting. Actually, it was at my mom's house to recovery. And he gave me, if you remember, the Da Vinci vaporizers that ran on butane. Some people might, but I started to I was afraid I was going to cough and break my neck, but it didn't happen. And I didn't that was the beginning of me. It's been 9 years, no gabapentin, no T3s, right? During the day, I could take a Tylenol if I need to, but it's just to sleep. So, I smoke weed to sleep and to relax and to do a lot of things. And that we came from medical. That's how we got through the stigma.
Yeah.
Right. Now
and there's so many people who have those stories they connect with of, the wife who has seizures, the uncle who has cancer, the aunt that has MLS.
I could go on and on and on. Right. I think we all know that. And that's the key to busting the stigma is you need to probe these people to find out what their buttons are, and how do you feel about that? And then shut up.
So Linda, question for you. Have you ever considered or just inviting, like connecting with producers and inviting markets or insurance companies to come visit those facilities? Because I know in the area where I live, there's a facility called Rosebud Cannabis Farms here. They're a standard producer, not a big one. They're very much a craft grower, permaculture farmer, and they had local city councilors and people from the RDCK here, the regional district of the Central Kootenays, visit the farm, and so many of them said that, you know what, I had a totally different idea about cannabis, and now they shed a lot of stigma through that experience.
We're getting there. We're getting there, Sami. There's definitely things in the work. Like I said, I'm constantly talking to the business development managers, have gotten very close with some VPs and presidents of some of the insurance companies, and I'm just on them all the time. But we are right now in COVID, and we're, some of the stuff has just started to lift. And yes, we're definitely going down that direction. Absolutely. Some of the ones that I insure are just so unbelievably top notch that,
it's also possible, like you could take some pictures and you look at these grows and they're just beautiful to look at, right? You just look at the money, right? And a lot of times, that is sometimes enough. I mean, there's nothing like having somebody on premises and walking them through. I totally agree with that. And I think that that's the right thing to do. When I was a broker and we'd be looking at very large risks, I would call the underwriter and we would go visit the client and talk to them. And that is something that, right now, most of the cannabis insurance companies, they can hardly return an email to Linda sometimes, let alone get out of their friggin' office and hit the road, right? And so ultimately, that's probably in the plan, but yeah, it's a work in progress. But that's the brilliant method, that's for sure.
Cool. Well, guys, we are almost out of time here. We have one question from the audience, which we will ask here. But before we get to that, actually, you know what? I'm going to do the question first, and then I'll see if you guys have any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we wrap up here. So the question is from Andrea Hoy. I believe she is part of the Hazy Camper. They're going to be an awesome edible company soon.
Great name, by the way.
I hope I remember that correctly, but the name sounds familiar. And Andrea asks, are there any changes to liability and recall amounts in BC for micros yet? And I know there was a reduction in the quantity required in February or March of this year. Maybe you guys can speak to that, and maybe there's more that's happened since. But yeah, what do you guys have to say to that question?
No, March 30th, they had changed it to, and lowered it for the micros, but there's no in the works that I'm aware of. All I can say is just keep pushing them, keep sending your letters, keep sending your emails, give examples of other provinces that have no requirements. Alberta has none. New Brunswick just brought it down to 1 million, which in truth, I think 1 million is a little light. 2 probably should be, the bare minimum. But
millions not a lot of money these days.
No, it's not. But at least for a micro starting out, where they're not, full on doing everything yet, $1 million will keep their costs really, really low. So yeah, you really as a micro have to just keep pushing and pushing. So Ontario, I heard bits and rumors that they were thinking about maybe lowering, but they're the highest in Canada at 15 million, right? And then we're next.
So Linda, question for you to help us understand, us who are not insurance brokers understand this. Let's use the Hazy Camper as an example. And I don't know the ins and outs of their business model, so I'm going to make some assumptions here. And if they're totally off base, I apologize, Andrea and Lisa. But let's say that they make a lot of edible chocolates, and let's just say that edible chocolate lot is worth $50,000. That's what they put into it, and so they put that out to the market. How does a $2 million recall insurance make sense for a $50,000 product? I know that there's a lot of costs involved, but can you help break down kind of what recall insurance actually covers and why you would need such a large amount of recall insurance for a product that might not be worth anywhere near that much monetarily?
But it's not about the value of the product out there. It's how much it's going to cost to recall it.
And so what are those costs? Can you kind of break down what a normal recall might look like? Because I have zero context on this. I don't know what the actual costs.
Well, I'm right in the middle of hammering through recalls for us.
Okay.
Right, as far as doing the risk matrix and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the question was exactly what
breaks down? What are the costs that actually exist in a recall?
Well, it's number one, they got to pick a limit that fits everybody, and they picked a limit that fits the big guys, right? That's the maximum exposure they think that they could be held up for. Their actuaries at the government have said, you know what, you need them to have $15 million to protect us. So the $50,000, first of all, there's 50 grand worth of money that would be part of the business interruption. So there's 50 grand there. Then depending on where the products are and so on and so forth, there could be significant costs, right? And typically it's third parties collecting all the stuff and billing you. You don't go around and pull all the stuff off the shelves and do all that sort of stuff. So it's literally an unknown. But that's a great scenario because there's hardly any shipments in anybody that we're talking to here that are going to be larger than $1 million, like really. And so it's an arbitrary number that the province has chosen, again, through their actuarial processes. And it's ridiculous.
So could a 50,000
with recall, what you were asking, Sami, specifically, right? So sometimes with a recall, there's damage to your brand. So it will also help cover that for rebranding, remarketing, getting you out there so that you're not damaged from that recall, depending what that recall is. Like if the label has fallen off, okay. But if there was like mold or a pesticide that hadn't been used properly, well, we're in to the time of social media, that's across everywhere very, very quickly, and your brand could be destroyed. So that product recall also pays to rebrand you.
Okay. I had no idea that was a part of it.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of like, you wouldn't have known this if you're not an insurance broker, aspects to recall insurance?
Well, the legal fees with the recall. And again, what Scott had said, right? If your product's, in Alberta, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, to have it all recalled, right? And then you've got to get out there to who it was sold to. They have to be known. Everything, all these little things, add up.
Yeah.
So, but
again, it is an arbitrary number.
Exactly. That number is an arbitrary number for sure.
For the canopies and the sun farms, right? Those are the guys that need that number.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I say you've got to, that was it last week or 2 weeks ago when we had everybody from the BCLDB and all of that, and they gave our, the emails, like you've got to push them. You've got to push them and let them know that the insurance costs for a small micro literally takes you out of a market. Like it can make or break you if you're having a $10 million requirement and you're just a small little processor.
You got to add $1 a gram for insurance. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. The excise tax is another beef I have. It should be 10 cents. They did it. They chose that dollar when all the fat cats were in here, and it's incorrect. It should be an emergency. Reduce that right now because of the state of the business, but they won't.
One last question related to recall insurance. Sorry, it took me a moment to turn the gears in my brain there for a bit there. Let's use the example of the hazy camper with my complete assumptions about them and their $50,000 batch of chocolate. What's like a realistic cost for a $2 million recall insurance, because I'm assuming they're micro, for a facility like that, with the understanding that there's all kinds of variables that we don't know here that we're just ignoring at this point in time. Like what's like a reasonable guesstimate of what that would cost a year in order to cover that $2 million recall insurance?
I wish I could actually give you even a reasonable, because it's based on your anticipated revenues. Right. So if you are going into it, and I say this with applications, you're brand new, you're startup, and they're asking you for your anticipated revenues, and you've already got your investor package and your seed round and whatever else where you're collecting money. And so based on those numbers, you're like, well, I'm going to do $20 million. Well, it's going to be based on that. And it's like, no, we need to be a little more conservative. And what do you really think you're going to do that first year?
Yeah, so let's say it's $500,000 you're going to do in that first year. Like, what would that then look like in terms of the cost for a recall insurance for $2 million?
I'm actually not going to answer that, Sami, because there just really are far too many variables. It's not a simple.
For which province?
It really is. If are you on your personal property or on a commercial property? Like there are so many variables that they look at. I can't even.
Would you be able to answer a question of, let's say we're only selling to the BCLDB, $500,000 in revenue, $50,000 batch, and can you give a range of, at the lowest end it would be this, depending on all kinds of variables, the highest end it would be this? Is that something you can answer, or also uncomfortable with that? And it's okay if you don't want to answer it. I don't want to pressure you to. I'm just trying to understand what is answerable or not.
Well, I'm looking into recall right now.
Yeah.
And the questions on the application that will change my premium revolve around, they understand you have your SOPs and you have your regulatory ways of doing business. They want to know, what have you done over and above that as an organization in order to, do you do another visual check before they go out, or, there's a process that you could do that's above the regulation to make sure that the recalls aren't happening, right?
And that will reduce your insurance for premium further, because you're reducing the risk by doing that extra process.
If we can show our methods make sense, and absolutely, they will look at reducing it, right? And the other thing that I'm looking at is higher deductibles. Meaning, the standard deductible is $5,000. Well, I'm saying, give me a $15,000 or $20,000 deductible, and what's the what's that going to cost me?
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm self-insuring.
And then you're just really focusing on risk mitigation, so that never
for that
comes
first
up.
20, absolutely, man. We're all over it, right? And put money aside for it too, if you can. Right. But those are the things that do it. And she's also talking about the revenues. If we estimated $10 million worth of revenues, or $500,000 worth of revenues, that will change my premium from the broker immensely, right? Based on, that's how they gauge what the exposure is for them, is because they're your partner, right? Like how many people are coming through the door? A lot, or just a few type thing. So we'll charge accordingly. And the other thing that was presented to me by the broker was what they call a deposit, meaning, I think I'm going to do 3 million. Okay, so that 3 million costs X. Now, if you do 6 million, we would like a little more at the end of the year. But if you only did 5, we'll give you some money back.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an audited premium that keeps you covered for the 12 months, but then you report your revenues.
Yeah.
And if you
adjust
actually had more exposure, they want it, and vice versa. So you got to understand your revenues, and don't overestimate your revenues to an insurance broker ever, because it will cost you.
Cool. Well, great.
Conservative.
Especially in your first year of business, be very conservative.
Just your investors. Pump that up for your investors, but not your broker.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And what I will say before I ask you each to share final words here is based off this conversation, I'm getting the sense that if you are a licensed producer out there, or you're going to be a licensed producer out there, what you should do is book some time with Linda. And she'll be able to give you an actual quote after going through all the variables with you. I've heard lots of good things about her and Max M Insurance. And I would very much encourage anybody who's thinking about this stuff to chat with her, because unlike a lot of insurance brokers that I have heard about before, she's not out there just to get your money. She just wants to actually make things work for you, and will be very honest about what you are actually going through. I've heard rave reviews about her. I haven't used her myself, since we're not a cannabis company that's doing this stuff and doing this insurance. But I would very much encourage you guys to reach out to her if you are at all thinking about this world. And with that being said, Scott and Linda, first off, thank you so much for being here. And second off, are there any final remarks that you want to share?
I'd like to add that I'm very active in the space of an LP, and I've been sorting out a lot of the bullshit, and I don't mind working with peers. If there's anybody out there who wants to pick my brain, I'll give you what I can without giving you out any secrets or whatever. But I could save you a lot of time, and I love talking to people and sharing information. You guys are my peers, not my competition. So
awesome, Scott. That's an amazing offer.
I could cut out some bullshit for you. Just reach out to me. Say you saw me on CertiCraft.
What's the best way for somebody to reach you, Scott, if they want to take you up on that?
My Nomis email, which is sWilkins@nomiscanada.ca. Same as our website.
Canada.
nomiscanada.ca.
I've just put what Scott said there in the chat. Can you confirm that I spelled that correctly, Scott?
It's Wilkins, Nomis Canada. That's me.
Great. So if you want to take Scott up on that amazing offer right there, that is his email. Linda, any final remarks you want to make?
Thank you, Sami, for plugging me. I really appreciate that. There are people that have been working with other brokers, for a long time, and my only thing is find a broker that you're really comfortable with, that understands the cannabis risk. We don't always know everything, and be honest about it. And you know, if your broker isn't honest about it and they're kind of blowing smoke, right? If there's something that I'm not sure about, I'll be the first one to say, you know what, I'm not sure, or let me find out for you. Just make sure they understand the cannabis risks. And I'm here for the same thing with Scott. Even if you're not going to use me as a broker, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I am here to advocate for the cannabis insurance and cannabis in general, right? So,
well,
and as Farmgate comes, it's going to be difficult. And, you know, so I also like to talk to people so I can have more information to, you know, propel that forward to the insurance companies and the markets. So, you know, just talking is never a bad thing. You know,
so Linda, if somebody wanted to take you up on your offer and chat with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Same email. I can just put it in myself because
Awesome.
It's one of those names.
Great. Thank you so much. And for anybody watching here, I think Mike Fundergy, one of my colleagues, he put a link to our Legal Larry interview with Linda from about a month ago. So if you want to check out a much sillier and shorter version of this conversation here, I believe it's about 5 minutes, with our lovely mascot for CertiCraft, Legal Larry, our wonderful sock puppet. You can check that out up in the chat there. Linda and Scott, thank you guys so much. This has been an eye-opening conversation. I didn't know how much I didn't know about insurance, and now I know that there's so much more that I didn't know that I never knew. So, and also there's like a few things that I've learned that I feel like more like I understand a bit about some aspects of the cannabis insurance world.
You've got a foundation, Sammy.
Yeah, and I gotta thank you two for that. Well, thank you guys so much. Everybody,
been fun. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a pleasure. This has been the State of Craft episode 11. For episode 12, we are joined by Dan Sutton of Tantalus Labs, who to me is kind of like the craft cannabis of the larger LPs. So I'm really curious to learn about like what he faces as somebody who is really passionate about creating really great product and craft at scale. Yeah, that'll be an interesting conversation for sure.
Dan's a great guy. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much. See you all later. As soon as I hit the end button here, it'll take about a minute, and then this whole thing will replay. So if you came a bit later and missed the beginning and want to see that, you can check that out. Otherwise, this will go live on YouTube sometime in the next few days. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. And have a good day, everybody.